Exactly. We're joined by Roger Hoover, part of the Crimson Tide Sports Network. And, of course, this leads into Arkansas versus Alabama. Roger, it's always good to have you here on Halftime. How are you today?
Doing really well. How's everything going in Arkansas? We can't wait to have you guys here on Saturday.
Well, we're feeling the same way about being there, that's for sure, because it's a big opportunity to show. People call it a measuring stick whenever you go up against Alabama. It felt a little differently about last year's team because, well, let's just put it out there. I mean, last year's Crimson Tide could be one of the greatest college football teams in recent memory. And it's a little unfair to point at an Alabama team that is third in the nation in scoring offense, 11th in the nation in passing yardage, and 10th in the nation in total offense, have one loss, and say that they're having a down year. So that's just the reality you live in with Alabama football.
It really is. And, for some teams, that would just completely cripple the program, and you wouldn't be able to recover from it, kind of like we've seen from LSU. It's amazing how everyone talks about what they lost from the 2019 team to 2020. Alabama goes through that every year, and they're in the playoff every year. It's just a different standard that Coach Saban has, and I'm really, really impressed with what I've seen from this group this year. They've had a real hunger, and they've been a team that at times Coach Saban really has to rattle the cage and kind of get them back into focus. But, I think this is a team that still has everything in front of them and still is playing really good football, even though there have been some games where it's not seemed like your normal Alabama team. I've been really impressed by what we've seen lately, and I think this group really is as focused and as ready to go for any games this season as what they got. First of all, on Saturday in the Iron Bowl, and if you are able to be successful there, you take on Georgia, and I think Alabama will certainly be able to match that challenge. It's just a group that has gone through its ups and downs and trying to learn how to play without some of those big stars, but I think now they're starting to peak at the right time.
Roger, last night Coach Pittman was very complimentary of the offensive line for Alabama, pointed out they have a couple of the starters from last year's line that's back, but maybe that's where the opening is. If there's one place where the Crimson Tide might have taken a bit of a step back, 10th in the league in rushing, that goes on the offensive line, and of course you're down to 2 scholarship running backs, but also they've allowed the 4th most sacks in the SEC. So, that offensive line still is responsible for being the 3rd most highest scoring offense in the country. But is it safe to say a bit of a step back there this year?
Just a little bit, and mostly it's been a step back from the LSU game forward with Darian Dalcourt going out with injury, the starting center who's been really, really good all throughout the season. But you take him out, and you have Sliner be your right tackle and Chris Owens. And, in the LSU game, he hadn't really practiced a ton at center. He got some reps during the week leading up to every game day, but he hadn't been able to practice like normal, like you would have a second-string center be able to practice because he's working mostly at right tackle. So there were some issues with that. We've seen Damian George step up really well at right tackle in his absence, and who knows if Dalcourt's able to go, you may not see as much Chris Owens. Because Dalcourt really has been the lockdown center for Alabama, and then George is young. He's stepping up at right tackle. And then Evan Neal has been so good at left tackle. He's been one of the only players that can kind of contend with going up against Will Anderson Jr. every day in practice because Will Anderson is just so unblockable. But Evan Neal is one guy that we've heard has been able to do that at times in practice, and he's been pretty consistent going against some of the best defensive lines in the SEC. I was impressed by the job he did against LSU a couple weeks ago. So it is a group that's had its ups and downs, but mostly due to that injury. Otherwise, they've been pretty consistent at times throughout the year. Now we just got to see whether Dalcourt is able to go this Saturday against Arkansas or not. He has been practicing, but again, will he be playing? That's going to be really a game-time decision.
Mm-hmm. Roger, one of the keys that a lot of people brought up this week, and if you're going to get Alabama, it's got to be through the run game, right? And Arkansas has a good running game. They've got 4 running backs that can provide 100+ yards, not game in and game out. And then obviously the legs of KJ Jefferson. What do you think of this Arkansas running game, and how do you think Bama will do, keeping it at bay?
I think it's going to be a challenge. I think Arkansas is going to be able to move the football and try and slow down this game. But that's going to be the key for the Razorbacks offensively. Make sure you don't go 3-and-out, because if you start going 3-and-out against this Alabama offense, they can quickly strike and build up, a 21-3 lead just out of nowhere. something, or 21-0, 28-0, something like that. So it's going to be critical that Arkansas finds a way to move the chains. And this defensive line for Alabama is getting better as the year has gone along. Fedarian Mathis is pretty tough to block, right in the center of everything. Tim Smith's been playing well. And then these Crimson Tide linebackers just fly to the football, whether it's Christian Harris on the outside, Dallas Turner's emerging as a freshman. And then in the center of everything is Henry To'oTo'o, who's had a really good experience before in his career at Tennessee, creating a lot of turnovers. He could still do that with Alabama, but he's been unblockable as well in the last few weeks. And also, again, Will Anderson Jr. is just a force. And, Arkansas better beware. If KJ Jefferson fakes it to the running back, Will Anderson's around the edge, the running back may get taken out even though it's a passing play. Will Anderson just flies to the football and is one of the most disruptive players we've seen in a long time at Alabama, and that says a lot.
Ryder, it's easy to ask, somebody outside of the Alabama, atmosphere and, little Alabama bubble this question, and you'll get the same answer. But I do want to get your opinion on it, especially with the way that the CFP rankings have been this year. Do you believe, or do a lot of Alabama fans and people believe that there is an actual Bama bias when it comes to the CFP rankings?
Possibly. I think, when you look at Alabama's strength of schedule this year, it's not been as tough as some previous years. And it's sometimes not even the fault of Alabama because, they always get that Chick-fil-A kickoff game scheduled typically against an ACC opponent. And just the last couple of years, it's not been a really strong opponent from the ACC to begin the season, whether it's been Miami. Certainly they've fallen short of the expectations that they had coming into this season. Look, a couple of years ago, the same story could be said for Louisville or Duke. So you're starting with your marquee non-conference game, that opponent not living up to the strength of schedule it's necessarily had. So you go from there to, the SEC. The biggest challenge was going to be the Florida Gators on the road, and Florida has turned out to be a disaster this season. So, that's been interesting, and I think that people realize that the Texas A&M game, it took A&M's absolute best effort. Alabama was still in that game, still had a lead with 2 minutes to go before A&M rallied to tie the game and get the field goal. And A&M has shown its up and downs throughout the years. So I think people, of course, realize the talent gap that Alabama has with a lot of other schools, regardless of some of the final scores and things like that. There is certainly, this is one of the most talented teams in college football. You could say, you look just on paper at these rosters, Alabama is going to be in that Final Four of whatever ranking you want to use in terms of talent. So there are, I think, a lot of people that maybe not necessarily biased, but they definitely want to see Alabama. And even though they have the loss to Texas A&M, I think people are giving them the benefit of the doubt in a huge way if Alabama can get a win against Arkansas, get a win against Auburn. And then I'm really fascinated to see whatever happens with the Georgia outcome, whether it's a win for Alabama or a loss for Alabama in that ball game. It wouldn't shock me again if somehow you see Alabama, even with a loss to Georgia in the SEC championship game, still find a way in the playoffs, especially if they give Georgia a really hard game.
Roger, out of all of the players on this team that you've mentioned, I think Bryce Young has got to be the most valuable. And, you'd say that about a lot of teams in college football with a quarterback. But, the only other program that I can think of that's been close to as dominant as Alabama's been recently is Clemson. And they've taken a big step back this year, although it has not been their defense. Their defense is performing just as well as usual. They don't have Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson. I mean, these are generational quarterbacks. But then again, you felt the same way about Tua. Mac Jones had that kind of generational season. Jalen Hurts and Bryce Young has taken that mantle and run with it. And the pressure that comes on you as the Alabama quarterback, I don't know if there's another position in college sports that has more pressure. The way he's performed has been phenomenal.
It really has been. He's been poised from the start. And I think just last year was such a blessing for him not to have to play and get to be around Mac Jones every day and also get to be around Steve Sarkisian every day. I mean, we know Sark develops quarterbacks as well as anybody, and Bryce was kind of handpicked by Sark, and I think even Lane Kiffin years ago helped start that recruitment when Bryce was starting to look at his college options. So he gets to play for a year under Steve Sarkisian as quarterback coach and offensive coordinator, and then you come in, another guy that's been developing quarterbacks greatly throughout his career, whether it's college or pro, is Bill O'Brien, and he's found ways to use Bryce in really creative ways, allowing him to move the pocket around. And Bryce so good on his feet, makes really good decisions, and that's been the best thing for him this season. Is he's got such velocity when he throws the football that he's able to buy himself that extra half second that makes the difference in a great play versus a good play. And I think that's something we've been able to see, and it's really felt like just a very quiet season for him because we haven't seen as many of those long home run style touchdowns. I guess we saw one in the Miami game that was 94 yards, Jamison Williams, and he's been the one guy that's been able to take the cover off the defense so far, but we haven't seen a ton of other explosive, 50-yard plus plays throughout the season, but it's just been consistent. And I think he's one key player that Alabama can certainly rely on. And I think as a result, he's flown under the radar a little bit because of that.
Roger, you just brought up some of the different coordinators that Saban's had the last few years. How, in your opinion, how do you think Saban continues to have that revolving door of assistants and OCs and DCs and never skip a beat? Because if this happened with pretty much any other program, there would be, mountains and valleys, highs and lows, but it seems like regardless of who is there, it's steady pace. It's steady high.
I think a couple things with that. I think, first of all, elite coaches want to go work with Coach Saban. That is something we've seen throughout his time in college athletics. They know that they're going to be able to learn things from him that is going to allow them, wherever they go next, to have some consistency and really change whatever programs they're leading. I think the best case in point is Lane Kiffin, who probably was pretty unorganized by the time he got to Alabama as an assistant after his previous stops with the Raiders, Tennessee, and USC. Ever since he had his time at Alabama as the offensive coordinator, we've heard that at FAU and that now at Ole Miss, the organization is completely the same in terms of recruiting, in terms of the game week preparation. Meeting schedules are all very similar, and I think that really helps him grow up a lot as a head coach. So you have that, and then you have coaches like Bill O'Brien and Doug Marrone who come in, who were both NFL head coaches last year, had complete autonomy in both of their situations that they had before with the Texans and the Jaguars. Why did they come to the college level? Is because they love elite football and they love working with an elite mind like Coach Saban. So I think that's a big part of it. Coaches want to play or coach with Nick Saban. The other part of it is he has such a good eye for talent because he knows, who the assistants are at all these other schools in the SEC or in the Power Five that he's having to recruit against. He remembers, like if Alabama loses a kid to, say, Tennessee, a running back coach, he'll remember who that coach is. And the next time there's an opening, that running back coach is on a short list of openings to come to Alabama. We've seen this time and time again. He keeps an eye out for who is, first of all, recruiting really well, and second of all, who develops players really well. And I think he spends so much time evaluating that we probably have no idea about because everyone thinks he's just focused on the game, focused on just Alabama recruiting. I think he has a very global view of what's going on in college football. That way, when he does have turnover, and he's had a lot in the last few years, like you guys said, he knows exactly who he's going to. It's not like he's interviewing 4 or 5 coaches for a lot of these openings. He's very pointed with who he wants to bring on his staff.
Roger, we'll leave it there. Appreciate you coming on and going in depth with us like you did.
We're back and better than ever. A new web interface to start the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your #1 spot for all basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BELIEVE50 to receive your bonus. That's BLEAV 50 to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, and baseball postseason, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.